We'll do
And
that.
then, yeah.
Yeah.
Please let me know when we go live, and then maybe we can start.
That they will do, no? Who will decide
Yeah.
that? That will be done by
Sandeep
Yes,
ji.
the.
Sandeep.
Yeah.
देखिए go live हो गया है.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so let's start.
Hi, hello everybody. Welcome to the first live session of the NEPTEL course, Energy Resources, Economics and Environment. My name is Matrika Gimire. I am one of the TAs for this course. I'm currently a PhD scholar at the Climate Studies program in IIT Bombay. I'm also joined by my two other co-TAs, Pratik and Zinia. Pratik, Zinia, maybe would you like to introduce yourselves?
Yes. So hello everyone. I'm Pratik Joshi. I'm PhD scholar at Ashang Desai Center for Policy Studies. I'm a fourth year PhD student. So Dinia.
Yeah, hi. Hello, everyone. I'm also one of the TAs for this course. I'm Xenia, and I'm a third year PhD scholar at Interdisciplinary Program in Climate Studies in IIT Bombay.
Thank you, Pratik and Zinia. Welcome everyone who have joined again. We'd really appreciate if you switch on your videos if you can, so that this can be an interactive session. This is the first of a series of about 3 to 4 live sessions that we might be conducting as a part of this course. So in this session, we'll be having our course instructor, Professor Banerjee, speaking about the recent developments in energy and so many other things. Professor Banerjee is currently the director of IIT Delhi. Before that, he was here at IIT Bombay as the head of the Department of Energy Science and Engineering. Once Professor starts the presentation, and after we are done with it, we really encourage you to ask questions. Please remember that this platform and this meeting is just for you, so don't hesitate to ask any kind of questions. So that's what we are here for. Without any delay, I think Professor Banerjee, the platform is yours. Thank you.
So good evening. And, this course is Energy Resources, Economics and Environment. This is a course that initially I used to teach for energy students as well as other students who are interested in energy at IIT Bombay. We offered this at as an NPTEL course. And after the first time that this course was offered, we've also done a couple of reruns. So this current version is a rerun. So what you will be witnessing are videos are slightly dated, but the content, the issues, the methods, the techniques are all relevant. And then we have, during the course, we also have every week, we have some assignments and some things that we would like you to do. The whole idea is when you look at an overall energy system, and when you look at the implications of the energy system, when you look at the energy systems currently are driven by the other impacts that we have on the environment. And all of you must be aware of what is happening in terms of the climate, and we're looking at the energy transition. So an energy system, its environmental impact, the kind of resources that we have, the economics of it, all of these are interrelated. And this course will equip you with the tools and techniques to be able to do the numbers yourself, to be able to look at different types of decisions, to see whether or not some project is going to be viable, to see what are the kind of implications of different projects. So we would encourage you, as you go along with the course material, also to try and see how you would apply it based on what you want to do in the future, based on the what you are currently studying or what you are currently working on, and then come up with different ways in which you can do that. Some of you would have registered for registered for this as credit, and maybe also giving the test. And you will see that for those of you, you will have to just look through the assignments and see the different test papers and try to see so that you can get the credit for it. So with this, since we have in the first few lectures, we talked about the overall energy system. Can you share the slides? Yes. We talked about the overall energy system, and we today, if you see the energy systems, initially all energy systems historically, we started off with energy that was available in nature. So that means it was all mostly renewable. We had water and wind, and then we started using fossils. So we started with coal, then we had oil, natural gas, nuclear, and then we found ourselves hitting a barrier when we realized that there are problems with fossil. So in the past, if you look at the slide here, it talks about the energy transitions that we have made in the past. In the past, in India, we made a transition first from traditional fuels. And so we would have the cook stoves, you would have agricultural residues, you would have biomass which is being used, and now we have converted to go to coal, oil, natural gas, modern commercial fuel. So the first transition that we had was from traditional or renewables to modern and commercial. And we also made the transition with an investment in large centralized energy supply and distribution infrastructure. Today, by all records, almost every village in the country is connected, and almost every household is connected to the large centralized grid. Now, this has been a challenge, and this has been done over decades of infrastructure development and public sector investments. We have created a large centralized interconnected electricity grid. This is one of the largest such grids anywhere in the world, and it's a very complicated electricity system. We've built large hydro and coal-based thermal power plants. Some of them are, at one place you have a super thermal power plant, 1,000 megawatts, large areas of land. The focus has always been on trying to avoid shortages, keeping on increasing supply, and most of it was public sector and government investments. This was the situation till about a decade back. As we go forward, we have now looked at what are the new drivers for energy transitions. Energy transition is basically a change in the state of the system, and an energy system is a very important system because it's a socio-technical system. In everything that you do in life, you will see that in order to do it, whether it is to travel some distance, whether it is to cook some food, whether it is to create a product in an industry, we need to have energy in. And so when you look at a change in that system, it involves also changes in society. And so the first driver for climate energy transition, as we talk about it in our lectures, where we talk about the climate change problem, the idea of creating a stable world, right? And we see what is and for that we need to have the greenhouse gases being limited. We entered into a treaty at Paris, in the COP at Paris, and a large number of countries, including India, made commitments. And basically, there's a global move away from fossil. In addition to this, because of significant technology development and policy support, there's been a drastic reduction in the prices of renewable energy. Solar, PV, and wind, in many cases, are almost cost effective. We have also seen a reduction in prices of shale oil and natural gas. This is because of some technology developments. So countries like the US, which were actually significant importers of energy, became an exporter of energy. We've also, in India, we've had, through the Energy Efficiency Services Limited, we've had a success in the public procurement of energy efficient equipment like LEDs, efficient lighting, very rapid decline in prices. We have also seen through the IoT, or the Internet of Things, it is now possible to have cost-effective sensors and monitors and controllers. There are technology developments, intelligent sensors and controls. So we would like to think that this would result in distributed energy systems. Of course, this is not happening. Most of our, even in renewables, most of our supply is happening through large centralized renewable systems. The energy transition that we are looking at is a electricity sector transition. We are having very high renewables now today coming in, supply mix and efficiency. In the transport sector, we are moving away from oil. We've seen CNG and now electric. We are now looking at potentially hydrogen. We are also looking at possibilities of private to public transport. During the COVID time, we saw the reduction in the demand for travel. In cooking energy is another thing where we've gone from biomass and we are now going towards LPG. And now LPG is, of course, looking at fossil and carbon dioxide. So in future, we need to look at a way to have sustainable zero carbon cooking, which could be electricity, modern biomass, solar. We need to see which one is going to meet that requirement. In buildings, a lot of the buildings in India, there is an unmet demand, and we are actually looking at increasing our building stock at a very fast rate, which means that a lot of the buildings which will exist in 2030 or 2040 haven't yet been built. If we make these buildings efficient, we make them net zero, we make them energy plus buildings, our energy systems will change drastically. We can look at our industry and all the products that they make, and these can actually move from the fossil to becoming low carbon or zero carbon. And this is again where we have efficiency, renewables, carbon capture and storage, and next generation processes. All of these can be actually discussed in much more detail, but this is just to give you a sort of sample. You would have seen in the lecture notes some kind of a Sankey diagram or an energy balance diagram. This is a sort of updated value of this, and you would see that we still continue to be predominantly based on coal in terms of input. The next is oil, but in oil, most of the input which comes is from imports. A large proportion of the fossil you will see goes to the power sector. So that means there's a conversion step over there. And then you have electricity, which is going to different things. We have some biomass which is being used. A lot of it is still in the residential sector. And you can draw this kind of a Sankey or an energy balance diagram. You will see also, depending on the source, you can look at IEA, you can look at many different sources where you can do these numbers and you can do the conversion. And in one of the lectures, we talked to you about different conversion steps. We talked to you about the difference between energy and power and how you can make these numbers. If we look at India and the world, you will see that we are about 1/6 of the world's population. And you would find that we consume only about 6% of the world's final energy. And as a result, our per capita energy consumption or per capita electricity consumption significantly lower than the world average. And naturally, as a result, also our per capita CO2 emissions is significantly lower than this. As we develop and we increase the kind of goods and services that we need, we would of course need more energy. We could do this efficiently. We may not need to go to the same level as some of the developed countries where there is a lot of inefficiency. We are also trying to see how we can do this in a way where we can do it with zero carbon. We have talked in one of the lectures about the Kaya identity, and you will see some of this data. You can also see the Sankey diagram for the world, and you will see for the world, instead of coal, it is the oil which is predominant, and then we have coal and natural gas. And the interesting thing to see is that in terms of primary energy, whether it is for India and the world, it is still fossil which predominates. The renewables are growing and growing at a faster rate. So if you see any of the new builds, it is renewables which dominates the renewables. So in Paris, these are the commitments that we made, and this is there in the lecture notes also. We decided that we should reduce our emission intensity of our GDP by about 1/3 of the 2005 level. We are well on way to do this. You can look at the climate tracker and you will see India is actually green in terms of going ahead with meeting Paris commitments. We've agreed to create 40% cumulative non-fossil power by installed capacity by 2030 and to create an additional carbon sink of 2.5 to 3 billion tons. These are the commitments, nationally determined commitments, which have now been agreed upon. In Glasgow, in the meeting which was held in COP26, our Prime Minister announced the following targets, and these were actually a step above the targets that we had made in Paris. So we committed to putting 500 gigawatts of non-fossil power installed capacity by 2030. By 2030, 50% of the energy mix would be based on renewables, and we would save 1 billion tons of CO2 emissions by 2030. We would reduce, earlier we talked of 1/3, we said we would be reducing emission intensity of GDP by 45%. Also, for the first time, we committed and agreed to go towards net zero carbon dioxide emissions by 2070. Now, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about net zero. There are many different studies on net zero, and you may want to look at the IEA study on net zero. What we talk about in terms of net zero, again, when we think in terms of net zero, we can see whether it is going to be only CO2 or it is all the greenhouse gases. It is going to be only for the country or also looking at country plus trade. So there are different ways in which you can calculate net zero. But today, if we look at our energy balance and we can estimate what is our CO2 emissions, we can say that, okay, if we go towards in a final year to a particular year when we can have the same development, the same GDP, but actually reduce this emissions to zero. That is what is meant by net zero. And the idea is, in many cases, what we expect the CO2 emissions, this is the global net zero scenarios which have been projected. You can see the advanced economies actually predominating, but as we go on into the future, there are many different things that we can do. We can modify our behavior or reduce the demand. We can do efficiency. We can look at electrification, bioenergy, renewables, carbon capture, storage, etc. And different studies estimate the kind of potential, the costs, etc. So let me just explain to you one of the things that we try to do, and this will show you some way to create a pathway for net zero. So what we have here is the plot of the carbon dioxide by the country over time. And you will see that we have this, there is a trajectory going from the past, 1980s, to the, let's say, 2020. And if you look at extrapolating that with a particular growth rate, you have one curve. If you just say in the last few years, we've been growing at a slightly lower rate because of the way in which we made plans and policies, we then get this next part. Then we can decide at which year would we have peaking and then where would we go to zero. And when we go to zero, please remember some of it will be met by afforestation, by planting trees, which acts like a sink. Some of it will be met by carbon capture and storage. So this yellow line which is showing you one possible trajectory which can enable us to go towards net zero by 2070. So that gives us a window. Today we are at 2023, till by 2070, this is the time by which we have to transform our energy systems. And this is something where we can see this will drive many of the industries, many of the different supply systems, and we can look at what it means in terms of which are the options, how much should we invest in, whether it is cost effective or not. So in the course, what you will do is we will look at things like coal, oil and gas, which are actually, these are stocks. And then you have renewables, which are flows. And then we look at that overall system, and we already have within our system an infrastructure which is based on the predominance of coal and oil and gas. So we have the petrol filling stations, and then we have the coal-based power plants. As the demand changes, the plants go up and down, and then you can plan for it. But when we think in terms of moving towards a renewable scenario, and we have, let's say, large amounts of solar photovoltaic, then you would have a lot of the generation coming during the sunshine hours. And then what happens is a lot of the demand is in the evening and the night, and then we need to have storage, we need to have flexibility. So there are many, many different challenges and opportunities. Again, as I told you, this is a paper by a group of researchers in TEDI, which talks about India's 2050 net zero scenario. These are all possible futures, and how those futures work out. And you can see for these storylines what happens. You have got more electric vehicles, you're going to decarbonize the electricity fuel, and so on. So you can look at many of these studies, and based on that, there are many pathways. So one of the points to note is that we are at a particular point in our energy system. We want to move to another point. There are multiple ways in which we can do that movement. And when we make those movements, it is also going to be depending on that, there will be different impacts on different sections of the population. There will be impacts which will have different impacts in different regions. For instance, most of our renewables are in the west and in the south, and a lot of our coal-based plants are in Central Asia, states, let's say Chhattisgarh, West Bengal, Orissa, Jharkhand, and many of these coal-based units get a lot of their resources from coal. And when you shut this down, it would mean that there would be, as we look at the transition, there would be changes, there would be jobs lost, there would be jobs created also. But it's not the same person who gets a job and another person loses the job. So that we have to look at those transitions. Those are things which we can plan. And these are things when we talk about the course and we look at the system, we need to think in terms of what is the implication, what is the economic implication, what are the what we talk later on about externalities, environment. We talk about the economy, the issue in the kind of investments required, and then how do we get those investments. So in a whole, if you look at it, the energy sector is very key to the overall GDP and the economic growth. And in order to have that economic growth, we need to ensure that a lot of the new developments that come are from technologies that we create, from jobs that we create. So we need to think this out. It is important for us to be Atmanirbhar. It is important for energy security concerns. So I just thought I would just update you in terms of some of these things will not be there in the lectures because this is all recent. We have also recently now launched the hydrogen mission, and the idea is to look at green hydrogen as one potential player in our energy supply mix. So with this very brief introduction, I would like to pause and wait for you in case you have any questions about the course or about the overall energy scenario. I'll be happy to try and answer that. Over to you, Matrika. We can stop sharing, I think.
Please feel free to raise your hand and we'll unmute you on time. So there was also a question about sources of content. Would it be possible to share these slides with them later?
Yeah.
I think we can do that. Yeah,
we
we'll be sharing the slides with you. So we'll be sharing that on the NPTEL dashboard itself. Please feel free to raise your hand or ask questions. In the meantime, we already had a set of questions, I think.
Okay, we can take those off.
Yeah.
We can take
Zinia, would you mind? Yeah, taking those? Yeah.
So this has been asked by Dr. C.S. Azad. He asks, he has two questions. His first question is, how can carbon market hope to be established in India? And his second question is, what will be the impacts of energy transition on energy market and energy economics?
Okay, these are two very, they are very broad questions. So we take the first one. See, what happens today is that in most of our energy systems, we have it's a regulated system. If you look at electricity, it's regulated. Some part of the electricity happens where it is traded and there's a market. So this is one place where you can have a carbon market. The issue when if we put a carbon tax is one part of it, or we price carbon. So if we have essentially a carbon market would imply that we would have norms and you would have to have specifications of this is the total amount of carbon dioxide that or carbon dioxide equivalent that an industry can emit. In which case, if it goes beyond that, then it would have to then buy. So earlier, when we had the clean development mechanism, there was a market operating, and we have to have the market finding out what is the price. So there have been some pilots. There have been some things where we've had markets to look at emissions and controls. Today, this is not yet a developed thing. The electricity market and the differentiation of, so one of the things which has happened in the electricity market is that there is something where if you insist and you want to have green power, you can pay an additional amount which is for that green power. So we will have to see, there will be some pilots. We have to see when you do this, what happens to the average cost of the energy supply and whether it imposes a problem for some of our population and ensures that the energy is affordable. So I think this is something we can discuss in more detail, but this is sort of a first cut answer to your question. The second question is, can you repeat that, Xenia, please?
Yes, sure, sir. Impacts of energy transition on energy market and energy economics. Again, very broad.
So also impacts of energy transition on energy market, very clearly we can see that, today, initially when you see, we had the renewables were getting fixed prices and we had a feed-in tariff and it is a must run. Now, as we go for higher and higher renewables, we are suddenly realizing that distribution companies have a problem and they don't want to dispatch renewables. So with the result that there is a time when the renewables have actually zero value to us. So when we look at the market and when we have the characteristics of the market when it is mainly fossil, when it is fossil plus renewable, when it is mainly renewable, is going to be quite different. So the transition does affect this. And the transition is caused by the carbon and the emissions, and so then if you have a carbon market and the transition would definitely affect it. How it would affect will depend on details. One can create models, but we need to understand that there's a long-term solution and then there is a transition strategy. In the transition strategy, there will be costs associated with the transition. Some studies have estimated this, but this is something where there is scope for a lot of people to do their research, do their analysis. So I think let's take one live question and then go back to someone's raised their hand.
I think Rajesh has a good question. Rajesh, do you mind unmuting yourself maybe? Maybe switch on your video and ask your question, please.
Yes, sir. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Yeah, sir. Just asking, sir. Now, electrical vehicle is the boom, and in electrical vehicle we are using the battery where the nickel and lithium are used. And for digging up nickel and lithium using a lot of acidic wastage, a lot of another wastage, which may be impact to environment in long time. So it is a electrical vehicle is safe for the environment.
So this question of safe and unsafe and the impact is not a yes/no kind of answer. And we will do in the course, you will see life cycle assessment. We'll look at the entire chain, and yes, the disposal at the disposal stage, there are issues. So you will have to create a host of, there will be a host of businesses who will do safe disposal. There's a cost associated with it. There's an impact associated with it. Overall, an electric vehicle, we can create a system. See, in every system, there are some adverse impacts. Right now, the number of percentage of electric vehicles is growing, but it's still not the major chunk. So what you're saying is right. We are also looking at, there are technology developments in batteries also. And so many of these things will, as it evolves, it will change. But right now, if we have an electric vehicle, what happens is, the main advantage of electric vehicles is because it has, while it is moving, there is no emission. So the emission gets transferred to the power plant, right? So it's a good thing for our urban air quality and health. And that doesn't mean that it depends on the efficiency. There are adverse impacts. We need to plan for that. We need to look at how to recycle. We need to look at the battery side. And that's why we need to look at cradle to grave, from the beginning till the end. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So
Thank you,
that
sir.
it has to be thought through. Yes.
Thank you, Rajesh, for your question. We have a question from Jyotika as well. Jyotika, do you mind asking your question yourself? You can unmute and maybe switch on your video if you'd like.
Am I audible?
Yes,
Yes,
you
we
are.
can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, my name is Jyotika Jana. I'm a second year Christ University student. My question is, so what do you think the rebound effect of increased energy efficiency of renewable energy will be? And do you think it will hinder us from achieving net zero emissions?
Okay, so rebound effect of, let's talk about efficiency, right? You might have seen there used to be an ad, I don't remember which company it had. There was an advertisement where, there's a vehicle, and because it's very efficient, you take it out for a spin and you don't worry about what's the amount of energy which is being used. So what happens is, there are studies which show, basically, if you think you have a very efficient product, then you don't bother so much about how many hours you're using it. And so that is like there's a direct rebound, there's an indirect rebound. Typically what happens is, we haven't had in India too many studies on the rebound effect, but globally the studies which have shown that the rebound effect is there, but it's small. It's not like, see, if you have a rebound more than 100%, then you may use more than this. But because there's a rebound, and because, let's say, we think we have a PV panel on top and that energy is free, then we don't use things more efficiently. So the effective cost may go up, and these are computed, these are studied, but this is not something which will make a very significant impact. We need to have studies to quantify these numbers, but typically it's about 15-20%. That's what global studies have shown. So I wouldn't say that it would negate our options, but it needs to be computed, it needs to be calculated. We need to understand it and then see. It's not, the rebound effect has not been, it's not got as much attention as it should have, and I'm glad you asked that question. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jyotika, for your question. Next, we have Nidharan, who has his hand raised. Nidharan, you can unmute yourself, switch on your video if you'd like.
Yeah, hello, good evening. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, sir, good evening, sir. I am studying MTech in Energy Engineering from NIT Tiruchirappalli, Tamil Nadu.
Excellent.
Yeah. So actually, I got a kind of personal question, sir. So currently, in what area can I work for my final project so that it could help me globally as well as from personal point of view, career point of view? Because I am currently studying in second semester. Still 1 year is there available for me to do a project. So in what direction can I work, sir, so that it will help globally as well as from my personal career point of view?
Right. So, you need to figure out what you're good at. So if you like doing things where you want to, you want to do hardware, you want to innovate, you want to make something, that's one set of things. If you feel you are better as a modeler where you can look at mathematical systems, there is potential in almost every domain, right? So you may be an electric, I don't know whether you're electrical, mechanical, what's your basic background and your strength.
Mechanical engineer.
Yeah, as a mechanical engineer, when you look at a particular system, you look at some of the problems around you and identify things which are of interest, and then see what kind of solution you can provide, and accordingly identify a project. Try and see that you identify a project based on something which will have an impact in the real world. So that's a very generic, I know it's a generic kind of answer, but it is something which, this process of identifying what interests you and what will be useful itself is a big learning experience. Rather than asking someone and getting a ready-made solution, what I feel is a lot of successful people are successful because they find the right problem to work on. So you should try and see, and there are many, many different problems in the energy sector,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, sir. And in what area can I do an internship, sir?
Yeah, so in an internship, see, again, depending on what you want to do, what kind of experience. So if you are doing something on, let's say, you're looking at electric vehicles, then you would like to then work with a vehicle manufacturer. If you are looking at some control or something, so it would depend, and it would also depend on, I think, what you want to do after your higher studies. And I think it's good to just, even to work in an industry, even if you, to just understand what is the nature of the work, that may be also interesting. So that you should look at it as a learning experience. It doesn't matter whether they are paying you or not during the internship. You should just take something which, yeah.
Right, sir. Right. So then, do we need to learn about the machine learning course, sir? Machine learning, because
Well, actually now machine learning is a bandwagon. Everyone wants to do AI ML. So no harm in doing it. Earlier we used to do, we used to do some mathematical models and empirical things, and then people would do. So now it's all machine learning, but I think no harm. You should have the techniques and see for your problem whether it's relevant or not, but it always adds on to your biodata.
right, sir. Right. Okay. So on kind request, sir, then can you please add the some additional new videos according to the trend in the course curriculum?
We'll try and do that. We will try and do that. Yeah.
Right, sir. Right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very
Okay.
much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nidaran, for your question. Hopefully that answer was helpful for other people also. We have a question from Sudhir. Sudhir will take your question, and then Ravindra. So Sudhir, you can ask your question.
Hello, sir. Good evening.
Good evening.
Sir, I want to understand the relevance of nuclear energy in current scenario, sir. Like it generates energy with almost a negligible amount of carbon footprint. So why are we not pushing so much in the nuclear sector as we are doing it in the solar and wind energy, which are like intermittent source of energy? So that is one major question. And second question, what I'm hearing most is that the economics of building a nuclear power plant is not very viable from the business point of view. So how true is that? And recently SMRs are gaining traction, small modular reactors. So can you put some light on that as well? Thank you, sir.
It's a good question. See, what happens is that you see some countries, for instance, you look at France, very significant proportion of nuclear. And very clearly, in terms of nuclear energy, it is a low carbon, even if you look at the entire chain, the nuclear power plant has almost like zero carbon. It's a low carbon solution. So it is a possible solution. The thing is that in nuclear, there is a small probability of an accident. It's a very small probability of an accident, but if an accident occurs, there's a very high probability of damage. And the perception, many people would not want a nuclear power plant in their backyard. And the question is, as a society, this is a choice we have to make at what is an acceptable risk. And again, different people have different points of view. If you talk to the nuclear establishment, they will tell you that, the losses of life and the kind of damages caused by a coal-based, fossil-based power plant over a period of time when it's averaged out are significantly higher than a nuclear power plant. In the case of nuclear, because of this, what has been happening is that increasingly there are more and more stringent norms and regulations, with the result that there is much more to be done in terms of instrumentation. And unlike in the case of renewables, where the costs have been coming down, in the case of nuclear, and you can see a paper for the US and for France, you can see actually the prices, the cost per unit has actually in some cases gone up. It's also because there have been not that many builds, most of it of new plants, because most of it was earlier in developed countries which stagnated and then they didn't want to build nuclear. So this issue of nuclear versus renewables is still going to, the advantage though in a nuclear can be a baseload plant, and it can provide a lot of nuclear, and instead of, it could be nuclear and renewables, and one can think in terms of that. Now the question is, do we have the area which is required, and is it acceptable to the population? Will it, when we had many of this, if you look at Kudankulam and Jaitapur, there were a lot of opposition, there were delays, and the costs went up. So one has to see that. Now, does that mean that there is this inherently safe nuclear reactor? Then you talked about the small modular reactors. There is a lot happening in terms of new technology, but we have to wait and see. And so, I mean, one can think of a large-scale nuclear scenario, but there will be investments, there will be risks. It's a whole. I don't see nuclear fulfilling a very large role unless there are very significant breakthroughs. And there are, of course, I mean, people are talking of fusion. Fusion is way out still into the. So I think this is not something where anyone can give you a very clear answer. People sort of, you can do the numbers yourself and you look at it, but you have to also convince the population that yes, we should have nuclear plants. And yeah, so I'm not sure I answered your question, but there's a lot of literature on this, and I think we are going to see nuclear growing. We did create, one of our PhD students had created a high nuclear scenario and actually showed under different assumptions that it can be it can be more cost effective than a renewable plus fossil scenario. But I think the current sort of perception and the way in which I'm not sure we are happy with that risk, even though probabilistically it's, yeah.
Sir, I have one doubt, like Russia has experienced Chernobyl, then Japan has taken this Fukushima, but still they are pursuing nuclear. I mean, like they are the ones who have suffered because of a nuclear power plant or something, but still they are adamant in going towards the nuclear.
So coming down to, I'm not advocating pro or anti-nuclear. In the case of Japan, what happens is that Japan really doesn't have too many choices, and nuclear still gives them, it's a concentrated way in which they can have that electricity supply. And the question is whether we are going to, even the DAE itself doesn't have a very large ambition of power. So we have to wait and see. I mean, I can
Okay,
see it going both ways, but yeah, it's a tricky question.
Okay,
And
sir.
a
Thank you, sir.
question on which I don't have the answer, right? I can
Okay,
tell you the pluses and minuses, but finally, as a society, we have to decide.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Sudhir, for your question. Ravindra has a hand raised. Ravindra, please go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. I am happy to be with the student who can also ask a tricky question to the director of IIT. I'm learning from everyone, and thank you very much. I had a small doubt, like we are looking at the power
We
plant
lost
in a,
you.
but actually we
We
are
lost you for a bit.
Sorry, we lost you for a moment. Can you repeat your question, please? Yeah.
Yeah, we are giving much emphasis on renewable energy, and on a philosophical way we are trying to replace the coal. But then, as we know, the renewable power plant works only for 4 to 5 hours a day on an average, and out of like only 300 days it is available to us. So, during the transition, we are coming up with the battery storage plants. So, can you put some light on the battery storage energy system? Because I know that we are making a 300 megawatt of solar power plant or 1 gigawatt of solar power plant like Neom in Saudi, which is able to fulfill the power demand of the entire city or a very big, very large area. So can you put some light on the energy storage system of such a big power plant so that the entire city can become a we can depend on the solar power plant entirely, like 1 gigawatt of power plant.
So what happens in the initial phase, Ravindra, is that we had the grid was being used as storage. So the
Yeah,
idea is let renewables come in whenever they are not there. The coal-based power plants, etc., were backing up.
that's right.
Now what has happened is that is not enough as the renewables goes higher and higher. So we've had a few. You will see Elon Musk's had in Australia the gigawatt factory and the installation of battery storage systems. We have a few demonstrations in New Delhi. There was a distribution company which did a demo plant. So the idea is that we could have, but the total amount of storage that we have in the grid is still very small. You talked about batteries and large batteries, but then batteries also have an efficiency and then they have a cost. And so this will add to the cost. And there are some demonstrators. So there have been now a few bids where you have to provide renewables, but you also have to provide throughout the 24 hours a certain amount, and then you can decide how
Yes.
to configure the storage.
Yes.
We have a possibility of pumped hydro, and that's also a very reasonably nice system. If you have a place where you have two reservoirs, one is at a height and one is lower, and then what happens is whenever you have surplus electricity, you can take it and pump it to the top. When you require it, you can pump it back, and then you have a reversible pump, and so there's an efficiency there. So that would today that
Yeah, but
adds a cost of about 5 rupees per kilowatt. Battery storage is also in that range. Now we have to wait and see which of the things, how do you make it cost effective. There are many other storage options. So this is an area where I think there are many technologies currently. They of course add to the costs, and
yes,
we'll have to
yes.
see how that gets into the system.
That hydro system capital cost is really very
Yes,
high, sir. Yes,
yes,
it's really
yes,
high.
yes.
So
Yeah,
because we are bidding of some of the project
sure,
for
sure.
government of India, where they are expecting the solar power plant, but because of the capital cost, the
Right.
overall the tendering cost becomes very high. But yes, this was one of
Right.
the options we
Yeah,
have gone through it, sir.
yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you very much, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
I think so. Additional to the current question, Jyotika has a comment. I'll just read that out. If nuclear is not the way for India, then do you think relying only on solar, wind, and hydro, which requires a lot of space, is it viable considering it's the space-related constraint it might put for India?
So I don't know really. I think a lot of it, see, some of it is going to be also if we could have distributed solar, we could also have biomass and biofuels in some areas. We would have a little bit of nuclear. We could have again some amount of the thermal coal and thermal with carbon capture and storage is a possibility. I wouldn't like to sort of hazard a guess to exactly what that mix will be. But that mix is going to be much more of renewables. That mix there are many ways in which we could also think in terms of green hydrogen as coming in. And I just said that, nuclear is possible, but I don't see nuclear having a very large share. So, we are talking 4%, 5%, 10%, but I'm not thinking that is going to be 30, 40, 50%, unless there are very significant technology developments. And I would like to just say that, the technology keeps changing. So it's like crystal ball gazing to say this is going to be the mix. And people often just suggest because things, But I think I would like to see if we could have buildings which generate most of their own energy. We have efficient systems, we have distributed systems. You have and we have industry which is going towards zero carbon. There are a whole host of possibilities. So we can think of many, many different scenarios for the future. Which scenario will it be? I think my guess is as good as yours, but I can see the trends in terms of, certain things. Yes, we have to look at low carbon. We have to have more renewables. We have to see how we are going to have storage. Now, if carbon capture storage becomes very cost effective, which right now doesn't look like it's happening. If that happens, the whole dynamics will change, right? If batteries become very cheap, then again things will. So we have to wait and see. But costs and affordability are very, very important also. All our distribution companies have accumulated losses of more than 1 lakh crores. And, this is also something that means that we are not paying for the electricity that we are consuming. And if the prices go up, it becomes unaffordable. So there are issues related to this. In the initial phase, what has happened is we've been guaranteeing the prices for the developers. But as you go down the line, that may not happen. And so we will have to see, you will see different rules of the game. You'll see the regulator with prices which will vary with time. You'll have to have, so it's interesting, and it's a perfect thing for people to analyze, to be able to give inputs, to add value. So that's the objective of the course. Yes.
Thank you, sir. I think we have a few questions on YouTube. So Zinia, can you read out one of them, please?
Yeah, sure. So this is from Ranjan Satish. Sir, what is the future of IoT-based energy efficiency management solutions?
Oh, the future of IoT-based energy efficient solutions is great. I think it's a good domain for a startup. Of course, there are large players out there. We have to look at convenience. We have to look at reliability. And it's not just about the customer doesn't want just efficiency. The customer also wants to see. So I think this is really a good domain. But there are a large number of players out there. We have to, and I think one of the things, if you are someone who's trying to do a startup, I would actually start trying to do something for the small and medium industries, then and try and see how you can do controls. But I think there is really a whole, there's a lot of opportunity out there. We can integrate it with the building, we can see, and you can have things where you modify you have the windows which adjust their properties as the lights change, and you can do a whole host of things.
Thank you for that question.
Your imagination is the limit, but you'll have to see how to make it cost effective and then how to make a business case for it.
Thank you, sir.
And I'm
Sorry.
surprised someone has not talked about blockchain and data centers, and that's also another interesting, very interesting thing. You know, people say that when you do these searches, the amount of energy that you consume when you make a blockchain is quite significant, and so that becomes, again, green computing is another big area for efficiency.
Ramesh has a question, I think. Ramesh, do you mind unmuting yourself and switching on your video, please?
No, we can't hear you.
It's okay. I think he has his question on the chat itself.
Yeah, you can just read it out.
Yeah. So his first question is, why is India not focusing on geothermal energy, even though there is a good potential as per the GSI reports?
Okay, so let me answer that one, Matrika, before you go to the second
Sure.
one. So I think what we have is, you'll see the geothermal, I've looked at this, you know, where along the fault lines, there is some potential, but that potential is very low grade heat. So it could be used for space heating, it could be used for cooking. We did have a plan of a power plant in the Puga Valley in Jammu and Kashmir. I'm not sure what's the status of that. So it's not, what you're saying is not really true in terms of, it's not high grade heat like we are talking of, you know, if you look at New Zealand or US or Argentina, we don't have that. But in some of the oil fields and in some locations it is possible, but it's not going to be a major source. That's my assessment of it. You can take a look at some of the data, even with GSI, see the flows as well as the temperatures. And because the temperatures, if the temperatures are low, because of the, you know, if you look at the thermodynamics of it, there's not much you can do in terms of the generation thing. Yeah, second question.
Next one is rather more like a comment, I think. He speaks about like how ONGC has signed an MOU with Shell for CCUS studies to capture carbon and store in depleting oil and gas wells. So do you have any comments on the CCUS coming up for India?
No, I think CCUS, you know, carbon capture and storage is an issue. When you have carbon capture and utilization, that there are, for instance, we see in the fertilizer industry, there are many options for carbon capture and utilization. And again, it will depend on how cost effective is this technology. We need to have a larger number of pilots in this domain. So far, what has been happening is people have found that renewables is cheaper than going for the CCUS option. So the investments in CCUS haven't been much. Some of the oil companies and some things are happening now. So we have to wait and see.
Sir, good evening, sir. This is
Good
Ramesh
evening.
Satla.
Yeah.
I posed that question and gave an update regarding
Right.
geothermal and CCUS.
Right. Right.
Just for the benefit of the speaker and to update the current information, I am from ONGC and I am a chief manager.
Okay.
Currently doing a PhD on geothermal, sir, and CCUS.
Okay. Okay.
Sir, to update on this sector, ONGC is planning to what we can say, set up the geothermal plants in a large scale wherever this commercially viable geothermal gradient is available. So in that way, it has signed an MOU with one Iceland company for the technology transfer, and as a pilot project, it has started in Puga. The drilling has already started there, but it is experiencing some drilling challenges because of the high temperature and high pressure. Hopefully, we will have a first geothermal plant in Puga in Jammu Kashmir.
Yeah, so that's what I was also mentioning. Puga is something which has been in the works for a very long time. I'm glad ONGC has taken it up. We have to wait and see the results. It'll be interesting to know.
Yes, actually, because of the environmental concerns and the very low freezing temperatures, and throughout the year we cannot operate there, and there is an army issues also there. Because of that, the project was getting delayed, because in a 365 days the operational window is only 4 to 5 months, and rest
Right.
is the freezing temperature. So that's why every month only 4 to 5 months people are working, and
But
the
then that will
crew is
affect the
coming back.
viability also of the plant.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
The main purpose of that plant was for the space heating in the Ladakh region. And
Excellent.
we also looking for the possibilities in Godavari Basin in
Okay.
Telangana, as well as
Right.
in Cambe, where GSA has given a report that we can have a commercially viable geothermal plants and good geothermal potential exists. So for
Okay.
the update on this one, already one company called Singareni Collieries Limited, they have started a pilot geothermal plant in the south, in Manuguru. That is in Telangana state. So that
Okay.
already the engineers have designed the turbines, which is suiting to the low temperature geothermal plants. So India is taking
Excellent. I think this is good.
on this
Let us,
geothermal.
yeah. Thank you. Thank you for giving us this input to the course. Yes. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you so
you,
much.
Mr. Ramesh. So I think we are out of time also. So we just have one final question, which was asked to us earlier. Zinia, please take that.
Yeah, this is from Shweta Vinod Patel. She's asking, how are non-conventional energy sources better than conventional ones, considering that they both have their own side effects to nature?
Okay. So this term non-conventional and conventional is something which is going out now. We are talking of depletable, renewable, but earlier whatever was conventional was typically fossil and non-conventional. So the point is, you can look at the pluses and minuses, and in every aspect, every technology, there are always some adverse impacts. But if you see in the case of renewables, overall, in terms of CO2, we are much better off. Yes, there might be some other implications and we need to look at it. But on the general consensus globally amongst researchers is that overall, when you look at it, it is they are part of the solution. And so in the transition, you're going to have a mix which will still continue with fossil. We need to look at some of these issues, like we talked about batteries, we looked at disposal of PV, we're looking at large scale land and water requirement, etc. All of these need to be studied, and we need to see. And we typically, the history of human development is we start with some technology, we find out some adverse impacts, we see, and then we solve that problem, and then we go on to the next thing. But overall, there are some issues with large scale deployment of some of these. But if you did it in a decentralized manner, many of them can be planned for and can be mitigated. And so I think I don't completely agree with your comment. I think the point that you raise is important, that just because something is renewable, we should not think that it has no negative impacts. But on the sum of it, you will see that the negative impacts outweigh are actually outweighed by the positive benefits that we get through renewables, which is not the case with fossil. In the past, the fossil has helped us quickly get a lot of prosperity and development, and that has its role. Now we've encountered a bottleneck. We've realized that we are going to have more renewables, and that's what the transition is all about. So with this, I'd like to just thank. I think this was very interesting, and we will back to Matrika. But I think depending on people's interests, at some points we can have some, we can, as you go through the material, we can have further interactions on some things, and we'll be happy. We are fortunate to have a very active group of TAs. So Zinia, Matrika, and Pratik will, I'm sure, enhance your learning experience, and we'll be happy to do a few interactions like this. So thank you all. Matrika, over to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you to everyone who joined. Just a few updates here. This entire session has been recorded and it's available on YouTube in case you want to go through it again. We'll be sharing the slides with you soon through NPTEL. And if you are not aware, there is a discussion forum on the NPTEL platform, which you will have to join separately. We had sent an an announcement regarding that before, but we can send a reminder again. So please join the discussion forum. If you have any questions, we'll be addressing through the discussion forum as soon as we can. So yeah, that's all from my side. Pratik, Zinia, anything? Okay, I think we can, yeah, all right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you to everyone, especially to Sandeep Ji from Neptel, Delhi, who made this happen. Thank you, everyone. And we'll be conducting, we'll be conducting the next session soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.